rock stars. How are you today? Feels like it's a nice day out. Rained yesterday. It's been disgustingly hot here. 95, humid every day. Today's a little better. A happy respite from suppressive heat and humidity. You know, I've always had a problem with my anger. I've been a rageaholic. And when I quit smoking weed and I quit drinking heavily, it was my attempt to cut down on my being a rageaholic. And it's helped. When I used to get angry, it just used to build and build and build, and I would not have any internal mechanism to shut it off or control it. Because let's be honest, we all get angry sometimes. Some of us are more prone to it than others, but we all, I mean, if you're someone that says you never get angry, I'm sorry, I don't believe you. We all get angry sometimes. We all get upset. We all get sad. We have an internal voice that allows us to control these emotions. That, you know, when we get angry, it stops us from flying off the wire. I used to fly off the wire, and I don't do it so much. My internal voice has more control over my state of being. That being said, I'm still battling with getting really angry sometimes. And lately my frustrations have been towards my son. He is nearing what you would call the terrible twos, which I thought, you know, my son was such a good baby. As an infant, you could take him anywhere. He was always happy. He was always giggling. He wasn't afraid of things. And that's slowly stopping. I wonder how much of me being a rageaholic before I quit these vices actually added to that, though. I wonder if I had scarred him emotionally and mentally. And now that he's acting up a lot more, and especially towards his mother, because she's a pushover towards him, I've been getting angry at him, and he has more strength now. He can throw things. And I have to unteach him. I have to unteach him some of the bad lessons that maybe I had taught him earlier. And teach him how to be good. Teach him how to be good, well-behaved. It's hard. I got really angry at him. I've been we're taking the time out now. Bring him up to his room. I don't leave him there by himself. I sit with him, and we sit and we talk until he stops crying. And he can usually stop crying pretty quick, and I bring him back downstairs. And he says sorry to his mother for hitting his mother. In whatever, you know, baby way he says, I'm sorry. But I feel like sometimes I'm punishing him too much. And yesterday I did get very furious with him, and I yelled, and I left him in the room by himself, and he just started screaming and banging on the door and stomping, and I told my wife she has to go in there before he hurts himself. I felt bad, and I apologized to him. I said, I'm sorry. Sometimes daddy's working on himself. We all got to work on ourselves. To what he could understand. He gave me a hug, and I did not lose his love. But when I get really angry at my son, I am reminded of the experience that me and my wife had when he was born. And I'm going to discuss something deeply personal here. When my son was born, my wife was in labor for almost 4 hours. She had a hard time pushing him out. She's small. She's under 5 foot. And my son was a big baby. He was like 8 pounds plus when he was born. He had a giant cranium. In fact, a lot of people in my wife's families tend to have large heads. It runs in the family. My wife had a hard time pushing him, and he was stuck in the birth canal for so long. When they pulled my son out, finally, and she did pass him naturally, but when they pulled him out finally, first of all, his head has been elongated like a giant egg shape from just being in the birth canal for so long and the pressure. And they pulled him out, and his face was blue, and he wasn't breathing. And it was the most terrifying moment of my life. Because you're sitting there in the room going, push, push, and you're all excited, and you're trying to be so positive towards your wife and to get him to come out. And actually what I did is I ended up playing music in the room. And playing music in the room was what really helped at the end. And my son loves music. He loves dancing. And I wonder if that ever had anything to do with it. But you go from push, push, push in this whole excited moment. You're up here. And then when they pull your son out and he's not breathing and he looks like a dead, lifeless body, you go from here to the absolute bottom. People are driving crazy out here today. Sorry. You go from top to bottom, and it just rips you. It rips all your insides, just rips them all out. And someone came into the room. They already had somebody prepared because they were doing heartbeat tests and they weren't feeling a heartbeat. My wife is so dazed at this point, she does not know what's going on. And they pull the baby out. They put him on my wife's chest for just a moment so that she could feel what her baby felt like before they rushed him off to a corner of the room where they had put him in a thing and they were resuscitating him, and they were trying to pump oxygen into him and bring him back to life. And I saw the look on the faces of the doctors who were doing this and look at the faces of the nurses, and it was not positive. It was terrifying. And my wife's like, what's going on? And I just said, pray. I said, pray with everything that you have to everybody that you could possibly pray to. There's something wrong with our son. He's not breathing. Pray. And she was calm about it. And she started praying with me. And she prayed. She was raised in the Buddhist religion. I was raised and baptized as a Catholic, and went to Christian youth group for a while as a kid as well. And I I prayed to God, I prayed to Jesus, she prayed to Buddha, her relatives, I prayed to my relatives, I prayed to my mother's mother particularly, and I said, I will do whatever, just save my son. I made all sorts of promises to every spirit about what sacrifices I would make in life to make sure that this kid had the best life he possibly could. It felt like forever while they had him in the corner, breathing life into him. It felt like forever. There's no way he could be alive after not breathing for this long, is what I kept saying in the very back of my mind. And I asked my grandmother, the spirit of my grandmother, to just, whatever you can, enter his soul, take the place of the spirit until you can find a replacement. Whatever we can do. And all of a sudden I hear a cry in the background, and it was my son. And that cry was the most beautiful sound I will ever hear. And I wonder sometimes if my grandmother did actually jump into his body and take the place of the living spirit. And I wonder if that's why my son was such a great baby, such a calm, wonderful child. Because maybe the spirit world had saw what trauma that we were going through, and it wanted to give us a reprieve. As if life was like, I'm sorry for such a rough start. Here's a great kid. Yeah, it was the most terrifying moment of my life. My wife felt confident the whole time that our son was going to be fine. She had foreseen it. I don't know. My wife has also been in contact with a psychic on and off who gave us some very real predictions that came true, which I might go into later at a different point. But when I was lying there with my wife and we were both praying, I made all sorts of promises that I would be a spiritual messenger for good, and I would sacrifice my life to and commit myself to delivering whatever divine message I was needed for. Make me a vessel for your divine message. And I've been thinking a lot about that lately. And it's because I've been hard on my son, too hard and yelling. And when I get like that, I'm reminded of the experience of his birth. And the promises that I made. The promises that I made to be the best father I possibly could. To give this child the best life and the best experience that I possibly could. And to be the best person that I possibly could for the world in general. it was also exhausting mentally and physically, because at the time your son's born, I had been awake for almost 2 days straight in that delivery room. They gave my wife an epidural, and they gave her a button that she could push to like inject pain medication, and she just kept doing it too much. My wife had never really done any painkillers or any drugs like that, and she was every time she felt a little discomfort, she was pushing the button. I'm like, you have to stop. The nurses were saying she was having a hard time pushing our son out because she was basically numbing herself too much, and it was making her unable to push. And after he was born, they smiled at us and said, he's good, he's healthy. And they brought us to a different part of the hospital. They brought our son to the ICU because when he was born, his lungs were filled with fecal matter and poop because he had been in there so long and he had ingested it, inhaled it. They had to clear all that out. So they settled us into our room in this other part of the hospital where we were going to spend a couple nights. We were there for a week. And once our son was prepared, they let us come to the ICU to see him. And when I finally saw my son lying there, they had all, tubes in him and all these things attached to him and just looking like he was on some sort of life support. And it was like I had been through such an emotional journey at that point, and I was so exhausted mentally and physically. I could not hold myself together. I just broke down crying. I was crying uncontrollably. I could not stop. So we go back to our room in the hospital, and I slept for like 7 solid hours, and I woke up and I felt so much better. And we went in to see our son again. At that point, they had all the tubes out of him. They said he's doing great. He's so strong. He's making such strong advancements. They were so happy about his progress, and I knew everything was going to be okay. I'll never forget that moment in the hospital, those days in the hospital. As I don't believe any parent ever will forget those days in the hospital when their child is born. I have to do more to remind myself of my commitment to my son and to the world. I had forgotten for a while, as I was continuously not even battling, just submitting to my addictions and going way too deep on them. Smoking weed, drinking, taking hallucinogens, and Adderall, all these things all the time. I was a mess, and I was in a dark place. And I didn't know how dark it was until I pulled myself out. And I'm ready now to connect back to my spiritual upbringing, my religious upbringing. It's tough talking about this. When I finally go to Thailand, I'm going to be visiting some Buddhist temples. We visit Buddhist temples here in America, me and my wife. In fact, I'm wearing this right now. This is a Thai good luck charm, if you will, for protection. I think I also need to get myself a Bible and a cross. I made promises to Jesus that day. I made promises to God. I made promises to my family members who have passed away. And I made promises to myself and my son. I have to fulfill these promises. My life and my son's life depend on it. I'm glad that I quit weed and that I quit drinking and all these things when I did. I was at a breaking point. I was running out of time on fulfilling these promises. And once I quit doing that, I was reminded after I quit doing that these are the promises that I had made. And it's interesting, there's all this, it's almost as if like the spiritual awakening and religious awakening has been more attracted to me rather than me attracted to it. It's been just, maybe I'm just noticing it more. Anyway, thank you for letting me share that with you. I hope you got meaning from it. And maybe if you know me, this will give you a little bit more understanding about why I'm doing what I'm doing right now and why I need to go through this. Why I need to go through this change. We all need to continuously try to better ourselves. We all need to change. The world needs to become a better place. We need to help bring it there. It doesn't get there without us. I love you all. Rock and roll. Peace out, rock stars.